have a different recording with just the leash demo, so I'll send that to you guys. Okay, thank you for the reminder. So if your dog switches sides often, that's fine. Keep one hand stationary, right? They can still go, but your one hand can still be stationary. You can still use this hand if your leash is long enough. You can still use this hand, the other hand, your treat hand, to manage that. Okay. Leashes on the waist, safety. Okay. If you have a dog that lunges out a lot, don't recommend you have leashes on your waist unless you are doing like a sniffy walk. There's a specific technique for a sniffy walk with leashes around the waist, but typically for a training scenario for a reactive dog, I don't recommend it from a safety perspective, right? A lot of people, you go flying, especially in the winter on ice, if that's where you live. What I will say is that if you are committed to using a waist leash, and one of the things I love about this one, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen again so you guys can see. I'm not sharing. Good. Okay. Is if I had a leash that was around my waist, and this one is made to do a bunch, this would be your anchor, and you better be sure. Right? You better be sure of your dog's behavior. The other thing that I would still do is have your non-treat holding hand managing the rest of it. Okay. Because you really, with this, I don't like to rely on body weight because there's a lot of things that can make that like not as effective as you might think. Okay. Fred, I know you only have a flexi leash, but I'm going to encourage you to try something different. All right. And if your dog doesn't eat treats outside, we're actually going to talk about that in a second. So let me get back, share my screen. Okay. You guys can see that again? Yep. Awesome. Okay. All right. So why do we use food for reactivity training? And there's, it's a bit of a layered answer, but I'm going to do my best and give you guys kind of the Coles notes on it. Yeah, more people coming in. Hold on. All right, there we go. Okay. So we use food because of a couple of things. So firstly, which is not the full bullet on here, firstly, food is a primary reinforcer. Okay, so your dog doesn't have to learn to like food. They like it. Any healthy animal enjoys food when they are in the right state of mind. So the other reason that we use food is it gives us information about the state of mind of an animal. If an animal is really stressed out over their over threshold, i.e. they don't eat food when they're outside, that gives you information, right? So we see a lot of people going, cookies don't work. It's not the cookies that don't work. It's the atmosphere, the environment, the triggers, the over threshold where your dog is either in a super, super excited, super frustrated, or super freaked out state of mind. And when you're in that state of mind, the last thing you want is somebody to hand you a cracker, right? That's not where your brain is at. You might have some dogs that are snatchy and grabby, right? So they're super excited or they're super anxious, and you try to distract them with food. And they'll take it, but they like turn around, grab it out of your hand and go right back to what they were doing. So they want that food, and they're at least present enough to know that there's food around, food's on offer, but they're not really engaging with you. And that's not the ideal situation, right? Because they're getting, but it's not giving you the engagement that you're looking for. Okay. So we want to use food, but we're using food correctly. And if our dog is not taking food, that's information for us. That's not try to do something with the dog more. It's information about us, about where your dog is on that stress threshold, on that sort of beach, green zone, blue zone, yellow zone, red zone thing that we saw yesterday, about where your dog is at, and then what actions you need to take so that they can become, calmer, a little bit more neutral. Okay. Food helps us build positive associations. We've all been there. You go to the dentist, and for whatever reason, they give you candy. And that made you feel good, right? So we've used food as a society. We use food to build positive associations. You do the same thing with dogs. You sit, I give you a cookie, right? Lastly, the act of chewing, the act of eating and chewing. And I don't know, I like eating, makes me feel good. But chewing is physiologically calming. So if your dog is chewing, using their mouth muscles, chewing, enjoying, not snatching, but enjoying food, maybe they're looking up and down as they're snuffling for food, that is physiologically calming. And typically dogs cannot chew and look for food and bark and freak out at the same time, right? Those are two mostly mutually exclusive, right? So there's a couple of reasons why we use food, and these are sort of the top fourth one being that it's a primary reinforcer. They don't need to learn to like it. Okay. So I'd asked you guys to grab a Tupperware. If you didn't manage to grab a Tupperware container, the smaller the better. Then I want you to grab a mug and a bunch of your treats. And this is a game your dog's going to be like, what are you doing? This is a game that has you practice marking and rewarding behavior. Okay. So this is not for your dog. This is, again, his human skills. So you'll be surprised. Everything that we're going to do today and tomorrow is human skills before you can teach it to your dog. Okay, so you're going to grab your Tupperware. If you have a dog that's bitey and grabby with food right now, you might want to just sort of move yourself or angle yourself so that, the food that you're working with is not within their reach. Okay. So marking is what you're doing when you say to your dog, good, or yes, or great job. That's what you're doing. You're marking the behavior that you like. If you're a clicker trainer like me, it's marking with a click. Okay. Mark and reward, mark and reward. But when you're doing training for the purposes of anything, your accuracy for your training and how you deliver treats actually matters. So if you're on the move and you're missing your dog's mouth, it's going to be frustrating. If you mark too late, then you've just marked a thing that you didn't actually want. And depending on the nuances of your training, that can get really tricky. Okay? So we're going to practice marking and rewarding. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this a gesture that I'm going to use. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. So when I put up my finger like this, and only when I put up my finger like this, you guys are just going to say, good. I can't hear you, but it's fine. You're going to say, good. I'll watch your mouse move, and you're going to drop a treat in your cup. So put the cup on a table or put the cup between your knees. If you are doing this class with somebody, give them the cup or the Tupperware. Okay. I can see some of you getting ready, like you're getting ready into game mode. You're like, okay, I know what's happening here. All right. So when I put up my finger like this and only like this, okay, I reserve the right to use as many fingers or hands as I want. Okay. Everybody ready? Okay. We're going to speed up. Okay. How many of you got all the treats in the cup? Now imagine that cup is moving and barking and spinning. Okay. So if you have somebody else in the room, they're going to take that cup and they are going to be kind. There's a really cute dog in the middle of my screen right now, all by himself. It's very cute. You're going to take your cup. If you're the second person, they're going to take that cup and they're going to start moving it around. Be kind. Okay. Be kind to your learner. If you're by yourself, And if you can't hear me or see my finger, that's okay, because I'm about to use an audible thing. Okay. If you're by yourself, your cup is on a table or on your lap, your treat hand is going to be empty. So no preloading, empty hand. This gets a little bit harder. Whenever I say the word red, you're going to put a treat in the container. Are we ready? Okay. The other person, again, the other person with the treat container is moving it around. So Little Red Riding Hood drank green juice from the red cup, and then she walked up the hill and saw the red fox that jumped over the blue squirrel and chased the red dog over to the house with the red roof. And how many people got all their treats in the cup? How many people really wanted me to go slower? Okay, so think about that from, your cup is your dog's mouth. It's going to be moving around. It's going to be doing different things. And you are looking for the behavior that you want to mark like this. There's one rule that we have in one of the rules that I have anyway, but that I have in training is give you candy for repeat business. Yes. Okay. Is if you mark by accident, you still need to pay. If you if you marked when I said blue and your dog was waiting for a treat on red, that's not their fault, right? If you said yes or you said good, that's what your dog is going by. So if you said yes or you said good, but you made a mistake, you still have to reinforce that. And very quickly, you start to not do that by accident because you'll be reinforcing the wrong thing. If I'm going to use an example of squirrel chasing, if we're trying to teach a dog to look at the squirrel and look back at you and not chase the squirrel, if your mark ends up being not at the look back and your mark ends up being on they took a step, what's the behavior that you're reinforcing? Take a step, take a step, take another step. You do that 3 or 4 times, dogs learn really quickly. You do that 3 or 4 times and they're like, my person wants me to take a step. And that's what I'm going to do. All right. So what you reinforce and when you reinforce it, super important. Question for clicker training, just hands up. There's a question in the chat about clicker training. So how many of you are familiar with clicker training? Give me a heads up. Okay. A clicker is the sound that replaces your good or your yes. Okay. The reason that clicker trainers like clickers is that it's faster. Okay. The reason that we like to use clickers over some verbal markers is that a clicker is a unique, distinct sound and it doesn't have any linguistic baggage in it. And by that, I mean, think of the number of ways that you can say yes. Yes, 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 yes. But you can say it all kinds of different ways and your dog is sitting there going, did it mean the same? Yes, different. I don't know. Clicker's the same sound all the time. Okay. The other thing that happens is that we like to use words. So quite often, especially when you're out on a walk and especially if you're having a good time, sticking to one yes is really hard. Just think about the last time you praised your dog. It was probably a combination of yes, good dog, good boy, that's so good. Was the good for the sit? Now I'm standing, or was it for the ears? I don't know. So people who use clickers is often because it's just a little bit clearer. We'll often find that the distinct sound sort of cuts through some of the other sort of environmental stuff, linguistic baggage that we have that we put on our dogs. And so that's why we use the clicker. Okay. You don't need to use a clicker, but a lot of times I find that my clients find that their training goes a little bit faster once they've gotten used to using one. But again, your timing has to be really good. And if you click at the wrong time. The reason I brought that up is there was a question for clicker training. How do you hold the clicker, the leash, and the treat all at the same time? Okay, so I'm using a clicker ring right now, which if you're in the US, you can get a little bit more easier. If you're in Canada, you can pay for customs, or there's myself and another trainer who I think is online today, and we actually sell these. Okay. If you're in Singapore, you're going to have to order direct from the source. But if you don't have a clicker ring, it's a bit harder to do the clicker ring for sure, a little bit coordination. When you guys see me doing stuff with a clicker, I've been a clicker for a long trainer for a long time. It doesn't mean you need to switch. So don't be like, I don't know what she's doing. Okay. But if you're a clicker user and you're not using a clicker ring, it's going to be, so there's clickers that have like little wrist coily things. And if you're using those, if you're using them on a walk, and for training, I'm going to say you're not going to be using them on your walk for the first little bit, but if you are, you can have the wrist coil things, you can have it around your wrist. But I like to actually get people to attach it to their leash because it's a little bit faster. I don't recommend attaching it to your belt or your treat bag because the number of seconds between the behavior that you wanted and then you reaching for the thing, you're not marking the exact behavior anymore. So have it as close to you as possible. So it would look like this. It would look like thumb. If you have a clicker ring, it's right there. If you don't, and you have one of those wrist coil things, then have it around your wrist, but have the clicker in your hand between your fingers. So that would probably look a bit more like this. Okay. And then you're here. And then you're here. Okay. Treat pouches here. Ideally not in your pockets because I don't like dogs that are looking for food in your pockets. The treat pouch comes on and off. So your treat pouch is here, your treat hand is here, your leash is here. Again, practicing in front of the mirror. Your main handle is here, your clicker is in here. Right. So you're doing this. So it'd be click, treat, click, treat, click, treat. Yeah. Okay. Is there a way to click successfully in the winter? I think I'm going to save some of sort of the clicker, clicker questions for after. I think I would make a good amount of money if I came up with clicker mittens. Okay. So, for a deaf dog, this is all visual. Yeah. So there's a lot of more thought that needs to go into markers for dogs that are deaf or dogs that are blind. One of the things that people will, do for markers, and in this case, you have to teach the marker. There can be sensory markers, there can be tactile markers, and a sensory marker might be like a vibration or, your stomp on the floor. But yet again, it needs to be something that's sort of distinct, right? So if you, for example, have children and they're stomping around all over the place, you wouldn't choose a stomp as a marker, right? There's tactile markers, but you would have to teach your dog that, so this is a very careful, long process, but teaching your dog that, a discrete touch in a certain part of their body where it's not going to startle them is your marker, right? Okay. All right, so that was our mark and reward. Okay. So there's deaf, blind, and then yeah, so the big thumbs up or something a little bit more obvious, right? And distinct, like a big thumbs up, is great because most other people do not go running around the street with a big thumbs up, right? So you have again that distinct marker that just means something to your dog. Okay, what are other kinds of rewards? For reactivity training, you're going to start with food because all of these other things are a lot harder to do. But rewards from your dog's point of view, praise, because they've learned it. Dogs do not pop out of the womb knowing that good dog means good dog, right? So they've learned that. Playing tug can be super reinforcing for some dogs. Now there's Meadow up here who loves to play tug. And so some dogs, they love to play tug, and you can do that. I'm going to talk about tug in a little bit. Affection and petting certainly is a reward, is certainly reinforcing, but not all the time. So if you have a dog that's super excited to go play with that other dog, you petting them, it's probably just going to frustrate them, right? Or if your dog is nervous, I did say comfort your dog, but comfort your dog the way that they like to be comforted. So if your dog is super wigged out and trying to move away, or you've judged that distance is actually what your dog needs, a hug on the ground that holds them where they are is not a reward, right? So if you're using physical affection or petting, you need to be able to know that you're doing it in the context in the right way that your dog actually finds rewarding and not creating a problem. Okay. Sniffing can be a reward. right? So sometimes you'll see people having taught their dogs to walk along, they'll walk for a bit. Okay, go sniff. Right? Some dogs, they need to learn that they're going to go sniff and then come back, but sniffing can be a reward, right? Chasing, not chasing. Chasing and not chasing. So it's not going to be, yes, go chase that dog. That's your reward. But in some contexts, chasing squirrels from your dog's perspective is rewarding. Okay? And then, of course, there's treats. So I'm going to say something about tug and fetch. A lot of people have, again, that vision in your head that dogs like to play tug and they like to play fetch. And probably some of you have realized that not all dogs like to tug and not all dogs like to play fetch. So if you have a dog where you've thrown the ball and they go and get it and they might bring it back to you a couple of times. And then after that, they kind of stay further away. Maybe they like to mouth the ball and they just kind of romp around you, but they never actually bring it back. We've come up with fetch as a game to tire our dogs out, and therefore we think all dogs should like it. But for some dogs, they don't mind chasing the thing, but it is not reinforcing for them to bring it back. For some dogs, they don't mind going to get the ball, because it gives them something that they like to put in their mouths. They like to squeeze it. They like to know how it feels. They like to squeak. They like to rip the fuzz off of it, right? And just completely destroy the ball. And for those dogs coming back to you over and over again, so you can take it away and throw it again and take it away and throw it again, they're not having fun. So I urge you guys to think about your dogs. If you have a dog that's like really not into fetch, what it is about that they actually might like. Yep, ours fetches only to play tug. So tug is reinforcing for that dog. Our dogs don't even go after. I had a dog like that. If I threw the ball inside, it was great. If I took the ball outside, he would just look at me, you go get it. Right? So dogs are different in what they enjoy, just like us, right? So think about, you're going to use food for your training, but when you're having a good time with your dog, think about the things that they like. And when you're further on in your training journey, there's a whole wealth of things that you can learn about using different kinds of reinforcers. There's a question here on what's the right way to pet your dog. It's going to depend on your dog, right? My dog does not like people walking up to him and trying to pat him on the head. And for that, he gets, oh, you're not friendly. And I really want to say, what would happen if I just went up to you and stuck my hand in your face and tried to pet your head? Not great. There's a little visual here I'll share with you guys. Okay. So all kinds of different options here. Okay. So before we jump into our actual training, hands-on training stuff, I'm going to preface it by saying there's often, feedback where people go, well, I tried that and it didn't work. And my answer is often, where did you try it? So what was the environment? So we're going to talk about the things that are critical for any of these things to actually work and for you to practice them so that they work. Okay. So what was the environment? Were you inside? Were you outside? What was the time of day? That whole list of things that we went through yesterday, talking about, how to piece apart a trigger. What was the trigger? Had you practiced in that environment before? How many times did you practice in that environment? Okay. What was the current state of mind or emotion for your dog? So let's say you learned something here, you go out for a walk on Saturday, you're like, I'm going to try it, but your dog is like already over threshold. They haven't learned this thing. So it would stand to reason that it's not going to work. Okay. What was your state of mind? What were your emotions? Because if you're not relaxed, if you're not relatively calm, if you're not very clear on what it was that you're asking your dog and whether you should be asking them that at that particular time, it's going to be more frustrating for you. Okay. Distance. How far away were you from the trigger? Did you know that distance was enough for your dog? And if you didn't, then we have no reasonable expectation to think that it was going to work. Learning history and depth. And I think my favorite way of explaining this is when we talk about recall, people often think that a dog comes back to you because you had treats at that time. Called my dog, they come because I have treats at that time. I want you to broaden that a little bit and think about reinforcement history. which would be the number of times, hundreds and hundreds of, I'm going to use hundreds, okay? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times before, or at least several dozen of times before, where you requested a behavior from your dog, they performed it, they were reinforced. That reinforcement is learning history, part of learning history for your dog. So if they have a strong depth of reinforcement history for that particular behavior, we talked about this yesterday, if they have also a broad learning history for that particular skill that you're asking, if they can do it at home, does it mean they can do it in your driveway? No. If they can do it in your driveway, does it mean that they can do it at the park? No. If they can do it on the sidewalk at the store, does it mean that they're definitely going to be able to do it in a football stadium surrounded by other dogs? No. Dogs don't generalize to different contexts because when they're taking their cues from the environment, it matters, right? So if you've not practiced with your dog in a variety of scenarios, there's no reasonable expectation that they're going to know what to do, right? And we see that I see that in the summer a lot. So all winter dogs are inside, and then the summer comes, you're like, we're going to go hang out in a patio. And for a lot of people, their dogs are like, you're like, just sit, like you know how to sit. Sitting at home or sitting on the street corner is different from sitting with a whole bunch of people around with a whole bunch of different distractions. Your dog hasn't necessarily practiced that for 6, or depending how long your winter is, 6 or 8 months, right? So learning history and the depth of that reinforced behavior, again, think of the example of sit. All of your dogs, generally speaking, can sit because you have reinforced that over and 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 over again. Okay. The other side of learning history is, what was their prior learning history with you, potentially with their foster family, potentially with whoever owned them before. If it was only with you, maybe they had learning history when they had something scary, right? So prior learning history, prior experience, just like with us, influences how well your dog is going to be able to do something in a specific context. How many people here play an instrument or a sport or have a hobby that they enjoy doing? Okay, pop that in the chat. Tell me what it is. And you guys are going to feel a little bit like I'm leading you to the answer that I want you to give me, but we'll get there. Okay, so, all right. Okay, racing, motorcycles, violin, hiking, yoga, piano, softball, brewing, cool. Mountain, tennis, yoga, music. More people are joining the waiting room at the same time. Camping aside. Okay, so there's some great stuff happening here. Ukulele, knitting, and yoga. Awesome. How long did it take you to learn those skills before you felt confident? Before you felt comfortable? Before you felt proficient? I'm seeing a lot of years. A decade. A long time, right? And depending on what it is, right? It does depends on what it is. Now, how long before you felt like you would be able to teach it to somebody else? So next I'm going to ask the question, and again, I am leading you guys. There's a very specific reason why I'm leading you, and it's not to make anybody feel bad, but it's to give you a little bit of context. Yeah, or not. Never teach it to other people due to anxiety. I know what that's like. I don't know, never. Okay, right. So yes, and teaching is a different skill than learning it yourself. So with that being said, and that's the perfect last actually answer to kind of close off the path that I'm leading you guys down. For whatever reason, we know that when we are learning skills, learning something new, some of us are perfectionists, so it takes a little bit longer, but we know that it takes us months, years, decades, right? Or more to be comfortable with what we're learning. I'm going to throw out there that for the next 2 days, you're going to be learning things that are new to you. So I'm going to ask you to give your dogs that same grace of time. I'm not saying this is going to take you decades, but I am saying that for a lot of us, we have these expectations. Well, I learned this thing and it's supposed to help you, and we've been working on it for 3 weeks and I don't know why you're better. Right? We do that. We give children, leeways to learn. We try to teach our dogs things that for most of us, you're just learning. And then you're trying to teach it to your dog and you expect them to get it right. Right? It's hard for us to learn dog training, acknowledge that we actually aren't quite proficient enough. And maybe that's why our dog isn't getting it right. Okay, so when you're learning these new things and you're trying them, some of these things are going to be simpler than others, but be patient with yourself and be patient with your dogs. Does that make sense to you guys? As a society, I find that we have really high expectations for our dogs and they're not. Fred says, thank God my dog is smarter than me. And so you'll see that sometimes, right? Dogs are like, okay, last time you had me do this, but now what are we doing? I'm not sure what we're doing. Okay. Okay. So with that in mind, yesterday we talked about discovering with the green, be with me here, share my screen. Yeah. Okay. We talked about discovering your dog's candles, so what those triggers are. We worked through that. We talked about, the environment, the different setting that your dog's triggers occur in. We talked about body language, and we talked about keeping things from excited to neutral. Okay, we want neutral. We want on the beach more often than not. Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about how to bail out and create space and why we do that. We're going to do a little bit of teaching your dog a walking position. And throughout all of this, we're talking about changing our dog's association. Okay. So if you're working on something or you're thinking about your dog, a dog that is fearful or a dog that is over threshold, if they're very excited, is only looking for safety, a way out, or if they're excited, accessing through. Okay. They're not going to be able to learn. And that's why typically reactivity programs are several weeks in length. So you are learning, then you're helping your dog, and then you're applying it together, right? So we're taking a little bit of a fast track, but this is by no means meant to solve your reactivity problems by the time you go to bed tomorrow. Okay. Are we going to talk about how to help a dog lower threshold? There are exercises. It's typically something that you would do in a group class or one-on-one with a trainer, because it's going to depend on your specific dog, what we use to approach. It isn't always a one size fits all. A dog that's lying down waiting for other dogs to play on the beach is a little bit over threshold. If they're that dog that kind of lies there and wait and then spring, right? I'm going to say that's definitely over threshold, right? They would be under threshold if they could lie there and wait and then just go, what I talked about, the head turns and they go with them. Okay. Look, a video is playing. I don't know why. Okay. There's 84 of you, not 99 something. So maybe this is why. Okay. So since it's playing, this is wild, you guys. Boggles my mind. Okay. So setting up for success before your walk begins. Most of us get our dogs ready for the walk. They're ready. We're ready. We're like, let's go. We're going. If your dog is already over threshold before they're even out the door, and I get it, they're excited to go for their walk, but if they're past a certain point where they're not responding to you and you haven't even left your home yet, you're going to have a lot less chance, right? If your dog loses their mind the minute you pick up the leash, that's their state of mind going out the door. Okay. Don't confuse that for if I ask my dog to sit, then they're okay and we can go. That's a start, right? But just watch the rest of that body language, watch what's happening. So setting up for success before your walk begins is slowing down. Okay. So this person is getting sort of out their door, shake off. She got her dog to do a couple of things. She's getting her dog out the door and she's doing a bit of a treat scatter. Get that energy down, get them focused on something else. If it was me, another treat scatter, if it was me, I would probably get a few behaviors in that my dog knows. So walking in position, practicing that for a little bit before you get out the door. Get your dog engaged with you before you get out the door. Right? So they get used to doing that before you get out the door, before you start walking. Right? Practice a few things. If your dog knows how to do certain things, get them working their bodies a little bit before you go out the door. So slow down that whole going for a walk before you go out the door. Then go on your walk. Take a couple of pauses, practice a few things. If your dog just knows sit, great, sit. If your dog likes to, you've taught your dog to kind of get up on things, do a couple of rounds of that. If your dog knows how to spin, if your dog wants to do a nose target, it doesn't matter what it is, but get some engagement with your dog before you go out the door in a calm, controlled kind of way. Okay. We saw this red, yellow, green, and we're going to add to this. So triggers, assess your triggers, provide the right amount of distance as per your dog's terms, not what you think should be far or close enough. Okay. And then why do we need to reduce exposure to triggers and work at your dog's pace? And that all goes back to whether they're over threshold or not. So if they're over threshold, they're not going to learn. If they're constantly being exposed to triggers, they're constantly going to have the same reaction. And what we're doing is just creating stress, right? And there's been enough stress recently for everybody, society, globally, everywhere, currently. But we've all heard and talked about the effects of stress on our health, on our physiology, on our mental health. And that's not different for our dogs, but let's highlight a couple of things. So stress causes adaptive changes in the body, which include increased energy diversion to the muscles. We've all seen it. Your dogs get stressed up, they're ready to go. Increased heart rate and blood pressure. And super stress, suppression of digestion, right? Or the desire to intake food. One of the reasons dogs, when they're overstressed, they don't eat. Okay. At the best of times, it's adaptive where it's short for the stress and then your dog comes back to relaxed. For some dogs that have a certain degree of stress, let's say they're kind of in that yellow zone or further, more often than not, this kind of stuff and the other effects of stress that, you could read about just from, our own knowledge about stress in the human body happens in dogs as well. And we know that level of stress is going to impact their ability to learn. It's going to impact their ability to stay calm. And at the worst, it impacts their overall health. So we really want to be keeping our dogs under threshold. And we're not saying that your dogs are miserable or, that they're going to become sick because they're reactive. It's just think about, again, that effect of stress on them from a holistic perspective. Okay. So if your dog is barking at the window, having outbursts when they go out on walks, more often than not, running around chasing things, squirrels and different things all the time, having frustrated behaviors, and some dogs then have outlets for frustrated behaviors like chewing or digging or aggression. Right? Just want to be able to keep an eye on that and have a reasonable expectation of what you're asking of your dog when they're in that state, especially if they're in that state perpetually. Okay. Show of hands on the screen. How many triggers? Now think about triggers. Remember, they can be dogs, people, sounds, noises, weather, storm. You drop a fork. There's a fire alarm, smoke alarm, whatever it is. How many triggers does your dog experience in the average day? People are giving me like hand digits. Most of you were going to say more than 10. 20. Yeah, 10, 5 to 15. Okay, 15. With what you guys have heard, yesterday and the last couple hours, would you agree that for some dogs that's a lot? Okay. So reducing some of those, if you're, that worksheet, our door opens to a garden oak tree 8 feet away with squirrels. I try to make them enough noise so that the squirrels hide. Not always successful. That would be hard, right? So we can't get rid of all triggers. We can't prevent. Oh, here's a good example. You're not going to necessarily be able to say, I'm going to prevent deliveries from coming to my door because they're going to come, right? You can change whether that person rings the doorbell or not. Right? If it's someone coming to visit, they're dropping something off, or you're getting Uber Eats maybe, or food delivery, it can be, don't knock on the door. Just leave it outside, right? The day of COVID, people are used to leaving stuff outside, taking a picture, you get a confirmation. If you get a lot of things where you need to sign for delivery, there are doorbells that will text your phone. Your dog doesn't have to hear it. Right? So there's certain things that you can do to reduce your dog's experience of certain triggers, especially if those triggers are happening all of the time. Okay. So yesterday we went through that list where you guys did a little worksheet. You started up with some triggers and you kind of assessed them. For those of you who are saying, 10 or more, do that same activity, list them out, piece them apart, right? And see which one of those you could actually help your dog with by not by training, but by eliminating them or reducing their exposure to them. So triggers you have no control over, like my fire alarm, your neighbors making noise or lights from cars outside, then you're still sort of able to do some things to minimize them. One of the things that's challenging with dogs is when they are constantly experiencing these triggers, they cannot learn that they are okay. They cannot learn to make different associations with them because they already have an association with it, right? I'm afraid of heights. So if you put me in a roller coaster, I'm afraid of it. Putting it on me 4 more times is not going to make me feel better, right? There are some people that can rationalize their way out of fears. Right? That's not how our dogs work. Dogs don't learn by flooding, and flooding is when you put a being in a situation where they are constantly experiencing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. Yeah, apartment building, most triggers are going to be beyond your control. So then there's things that you want to do to support your dog in a different way. White noise, brown noise, that kind of thing. Somebody is annotating on my screen, which is cool. And I'm glad you just wrote all dogs. But we're going to turn that off. Okay. So how do you know if your dog is stressed out? How is your dog responding to the trigger? How often are they triggered? How quickly does your dog recover? What's going on with their body language? Do they shake off or do they stay like that? Right? How much is this impacting your dog's life? And for most of us, we're going to say our dog sees a squirrel, it freaks out, and then they're fine. Right? That's just what they do. They see a squirrel, they want to chase the squirrel, and then they reset to normal. So that might be a minor one. A major one might be every time I go for a walk, I pass this house and there is always a dog barking. And you have a reactive dog, you have an excited dog. I would say that's going to impact your dog quite a bit because it happens every single time. And your dog probably starts to be a little bit more wary as you're even approaching that house. Maybe you haven't noticed that, but maybe you have. Okay. So how much of an impact does it have on your dog's life and what can you do? Right. So even if you go past that and your dog barks and you feel like, okay, we went past it, they're over it. Remember that stress takes a while to leave the body chemically, right? And that trigger stacking is in place. Squirrels, great, had a great time, play, found a steak, amazing, saw a man, mailman gave me cookies, fantastic. But all of those things stack up. And so some of the things that you can control, if you can, is to remove those things. Otherwise, you're doing sort of, management stuff. Okay. You're always talking about stress management and decompression before you're talking about training. Before you're talking about fixing your dog or modifying their behavior, we need to look at how we can support them in that so that they can be successful. Okay. Different than holding your dog accountable, which is not something I believe in. Which is a topic for a different day. It's a whole other, we could all get together and I could talk about it some more. Okay, so first you're having fun with your dog, because if you're only working on reactivity training, that's not really what you got your dog for. There are still things that you enjoy doing with your dog, and I want to make sure that you guys remember what those are and do them. Okay, reducing their exposure to triggers, setting reasonable goals, which goes along quite well with this comment from Soph and Les. Yes, shortening the reaction is a viable goal versus extinguishing or diversion. And by that is your dog might still react, and that's okay, right? They're communicating something, but maybe it doesn't carry on for several minutes, right? Maybe they have a reaction, but it's shorter and smaller, and they recover faster. And if that's your goal, you will start to find that some of those things can be extinguished. For other things, total diversion might be appropriate, right? I'm going to give you guys an example. I can with the terrier, I can with Logan, and we have worked on this for years because you work on things like any other skills that you guys have, the hobbies that you have. If you work on it and then you never use it, it goes away, right? That skill goes away. Your proficiency goes away. Your ability to do that thing on the fly goes away. So squirrels, we practice them all the time. Why? Because squirrels are everywhere, right? Diversion for me would be this little Pomeranian that lives in my building that scared him to death when he was a puppy. And whenever we see that dog right now, still like 4 years later, it is still a diversion. It scared him so badly, he went and hid underneath the planter, and it took me 45 minutes to get him out. Right? So that Pomeranian, or really any Pomeranian, and the ones that we have here always yell. So it's always going to be a predictable experience. And I can get him away faster now, but it's still a diversion. Another dog have a much easier time, right? So again, it's going to depend on the trigger and the context. Okay. Begin training. Okay. And then celebrating small successes in every single class. And my clients are kind of do this to every single class. People typically give their training updates or how was your weekend updates or how was your week updates with all of the negative stuff that happened. We have a negative bias. It's what we do as a society. So in my classes, I'm always asking people the one good thing that they did with their dog that was not related to training. And it's a struggle. And even when they start with a good thing, then there's often, but he still freaked out. But he barked at something, right? You want to switch that mindset, because having a reactive dog is just a small part of their personality. Just like if you have, a friend who's anxious, it's just a little part of who they are, and it can be a struggle. You don't want it to be the thing that you focus on every time, you're talking about them, right? Just celebrate the small successes for yourself and for your dogs. Okay. So we're going to come back to talk about sniffing. I want to get you guys skipping a whole bunch of stuff. Training. Okay. So hazard awareness. We're going to talk about things that help us create the distance. Okay. So creating distance, you're going to use an activity as opposed to trying to haul your dog. There's still going to be some hauling. Okay, I'm not going to lie. But if you have different games that you can play with your dog to create distance, that tends to be much more successful and still builds your positive experience, a positive association. So there's a couple of ways to do that. Escape using a U-turn. And I'm going to ask in a second, Catherine, Val, and Blizzard, if she is awake. If she's not awake, we'll get somebody else to demo the start of teaching a U-turn. Escape using a treat magnet, which we're not really going to practice today, but it's pretty much the act of getting your dog, and this is a skill, this is a you skill, of having treats in your hand and being able to deliver it to your dog's nose so that they can eat. And here's my little handy dog. Okay, so handy dog. Treat in the hand as you're walking, right? So that requires a little bit of dexterity on your part to be able to walk and release treats at the same time. So if your dog is still able to take food, but training or a game is not working, you're going to use a treat magnet. And that's not treat over here and make them come to you. It's like it is in the picture, treat magnet, because your dog is stuck to it as you move. Okay. A pretty obvious one is escape crossing the street. And yes, I am using the word escape because when you are in a situation where your goal is to prevent your dog from having a reaction, you're escaping from that trigger. Okay. Another technique is mark and move away. So depending, we're gonna talk about that. And then tomorrow we're gonna concentrate on pattern games. There's a couple of games I like to teach you guys. Okay. So emergency. We don't want our dogs to look like that. The emergency U-turn. No. I'm going to ask everyone to sort of keep on mute. Catherine, give me a heads up. Is Blizzard awake? Okay, Blizzard is awake. So Catherine, Val, and Blizzard are graduates from my reactivity program this year. Okay. Okay, everybody can see Catherine and Val, they're setting up. So I'm going to talk them through so you guys can see what it looks like. The beginning to teach your dog a U-turn is not taking them by the leash and turning them around. I was with a puppy today and teaching her that when I say the cue, she turns, right? So she turns at the same time as you turn. It's a much smoother, faster, and you turn it into a game with them. The way that we play this game, and just hold on for 1 second, Catherine, but we're just going to do this. Okay. So the way that we play this game, here's my little doggy, is she's going to put a treat on the floor. Somebody's in the waiting room. 1 second, guys. Treat on the floor in front of her dog. Blizzard's going to eat the food. And then when she's done eating the food, she doesn't have a choice. Her head is going to come up. As her head comes up, Catherine's moving around to the tail, putting a treat. Blizzard's going to turn around, eat the food. Head's going to come up. Catherine's going to come back over here and she's going to turn around. Treat on the floor. You're encouraging your dog's movement back and forth and back and forth. And when they get that into muscle memory, just like a sit, you can then put that on a cue. Walking along. But now when you put it on a cue, you're no longer dropping the food on the floor, right? So that's a progression. So we get them learning the pattern. Then we give it a cue. And then with enough practice, you can then say to your dog, turn, and have them turn around with you. That's the end goal. We're not going to get there today. We're not going to get there tomorrow. This is just going to get you guys started. What you can use it for: turn away from squirrels, turn away from another dog. We had company over. They were sleeping in our bedroom where we would usually sleep, and we were sleeping in a different room. And Logan really wanted to go to bed because that was his room. So he starts heading towards his room and I go, turn. He turns around. Okay, so lots of different ways that you can use it. We're going to have a with dog demo with Catherine and Val. I'm going to ask you guys to watch it first. Hi, Blizzard. And then you guys are all going to get a chance to play with your dogs. Okay. They're doing it on leash, which is fine. When you guys are going to do it with your dogs, they're going to be off leash. Okay. Cool. And the reason for that is your dogs don't need to deal with your leash mechanics while they're trying to learn something at the same time. Okay. So we're going to get Blizzard over. Treat goes down. Catherine moves around behind. Treat goes down. She's going to move around behind. Blizzard head comes up behind. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Catherine, if that's okay. Perfect. Okay. So the treat goes down. Blizzard's going to eat. She's moving to the other side. Her head's coming up and the treat goes down. She's moving behind her. She's turning around. The treat goes down. Your dogs typically don't turn around that quickly unless they're running. Okay. So you're teaching them the action of turning around and following you. And now we're going to add the cue. So treat goes down. She's going to take a step. She's going to say, turn. Blizzard is going to turn because she's following her. Treat goes down. We're adding the cue to associate the action of turning with the word.
Turn. Turn.
And we're leveraging our dog's natural inclination to look down, look up, and turn their head to figure out where you went because you've got food, right? This isn't different than you sit, I treat. It's just in a different pattern. And there's a nice middle. Good girl, Blizzard. Thank you.
That's it.
Good girl. Blizzard had an amazing, we had a class a couple of weeks ago, and she had an amazing, we're going for a walk on a loose leash. And Val said to me, there's a bunny over there. Because we're on Zoom. There's a bunny over there. And they got her walking down the street and playing some games. And she acknowledged the bunny. And then she was like, no, I'm good. And she kept going. Right? Doesn't mean that it happens 100% of the time, but that was an awesome success. And I was glad that I could see it. So up off your feet. If your dogs are awake, if they're not awake, they'll know how you have food. They're going to do it. So treat down in front of your dog's nose. Step around behind them. Drop a treat. Don't use the word turn just yet, please, because your dogs don't know what it means. It's just noise clutter right now. They don't need to do anything else if they're offering a sit, as I see some of your dogs are doing. Just ignore that. That's fine. Keep your pattern going. Wait till they lift their head to put the treat down. You guys are going to do 5 repeats of this, and then you're going to come on back. If your dogs need you to go slow at first, that's great. Keep those turns tight and don't go more than 2 or 3 steps past either end of your dog. Okay. Okay. Now, most of you are turning in one direction with your dogs. I'm going to ask you to change it up. Have them turn the other way. And if your dogs are comfortable and having a good time and turning with you, I want you guys to speed it up. Pretend that there is a trigger that you need your dogs to turn around from. And I can't tell who's in the bed with Claire, and you don't need to answer, Claire, but I think it's awesome that you've got a dog relaxing on a bed while you do that. That's amazing. Good job. See, Bonnie's got a Wheatie following her around. Nice. I hope Noodle's feeling better. If your dog is taking a break and they've just decided to lie down, that is okay too. Okay. Dougie's happy. Okay, everybody come back to your camera. So this seemed relatively easy, right? Something that you can practice. Your dogs are having a good time. You're both moving. You're moving around. Evie, I'm sorry. I hope he feels better. Just take care of him and tend to him. Okay. Right now, if your dog anticipates your turn, that's what you want. Right? You want them to go, oh, I know what to do. It's okay. Right? And if your dog didn't take one treat, that might be just today, or we need to think about like how best to kind of encourage them, or they think you're being weird because chances are you've not done this with your dog before and they don't know what you're doing. Right? So the more you play this game, you guys are going to play this game. I would say if you played this game tomorrow to get it to Saturday, go back, forth, back and forth, back and forth. By the weekend, if you were playing this game, you're going to be able to say turn, but you are only going to say turn as your dog's head turns. They don't know what turn means yet. Okay. Another, thing that we like to do is when our dogs aren't doing something, we repeat the word as if it will make them understand it. But when you're first learning something, you could be saying pokeroo right now and it wouldn't mean anything. And if you want to use the cue pokeroo when they turn their head, you can, but they don't know what that means. So you're going to say turn as they turn their head, not before. If you have a dog that you have asked always to sit before they get a treat or to wait to be released before they get a treat, your dog is going to look at the treat you put on the floor and look at you. Right there and be like, am I allowed to take it? So you might have to get them used to like chasing the treat or doing things like this, right? You're going to work on like, there's context when you can take that treat. Okay. If you really, really struggle, drop me a note and let me know. A lot of your dogs love this. They get to, they're playing. They are playing with you. They get treats. If you're worried about their food intake, the treats can be tiny, 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 tiny. Okay. They can sniff it out. Okay. Can you use a clicker or just the word turn? If you're using a clicker, remember that the clicker marks the behavior. It's not the cue to perform the behavior. So if you're clicker training, it's going to be treat goes down, they eat the treat, head comes up, it starts to turn, you say turn, their head turns, you click, and then you treat. Okay. You don't need to use a clicker for this. It's a little bit convoluted. Plus, when you've got the emergency turn, you're not gonna have your clicker, right? So right now you're shaping the turn of the head. Okay. Yeah, some of you have done a really good job at training your dogs where and when they need to eat food. Right. So working with them and giving them a little bit more freedom in a certain context when you're training is going to be something that you're going to have to work on a little bit. So simple game, right? Over and over and over and over. Have fun with it. Do it in different, start in your house. I would say in your house for 4 or 5 days, then work it up. Ola the Aussie got woken up to do this and now he is fully awake. I'm sorry. Okay. So we're looking for practicing that inside, always inside first. If your dog can't do it outside, they can't do it inside. Or sorry, inside, they won't be able to do it outside. Then you're gradually going to move it to different rooms. Then you might do it just outside your front door, right? But keeping your energy up, keeping it a game helps your dog have a lot of fun. And it's a relatively simple thing to teach a dog because they're having a good time. The other reason for that emergency U-turn and teaching it with head down and head comes back up is the game that we're going to play tomorrow. Okay. So this one is a skill to teach. Teach your dog to do a U-turn makes it much easier than, hauling them away. Right. Typically, when you want to move your dog away from something, and it's okay if this is you, it's all right. I want to use this. This is like my leash, right? Typically, we want to use our dogs away. Our dog is over there. You can't see my dog. My dog is over there. I am way over here and I'm going, come on. Come on. Let's go. All right. Your dog's not paying attention. So a couple of things. Stand closer to your dog. So if you're doing that leash hold, it would look something like this. And this is in conjunction with you having practiced the game. Okay. So let's say you've practiced your game so it's fluent and your dog is actually like, oh, turn. Great. This is what it would look like. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you guys can see me. Nope, I'm already stopped. There we go. Okay. You guys see okay? All right. So leash is here, closed. Other hand is here, parked, the other one. If you needed to pull your dog, you could stand here with all of this leash kind of, I'm just going to put it over here, hanging off the end there. You could stand here and try and pull your dog, or you could have this parked. You run your hand as close to your dog as you can get it. Right? So closer to their harness or closer to their collar. Ideally their harness, because we talked about this yesterday. So a little bit closer, and you're going to go without a whole lot of tension. You can go turn once you've taught them this, and then you can help guide them a little bit faster. But in between now and then, if you're needing to U-turn your dogs, if you want to turn them, get closer to them. It's a little bit like physics. If you're trying to stand way over here and turn something, it's a lot harder than if you're closer. Okay. Will I send a link to that leash? I will. This is called the Logan leash. It's a leash that I designed, and you can order it from a woman here in Ontario who makes them. It is a biothane. It is a multi-way leash, but I have it configured in a certain way for how I like to use leashes. So I will send that to you guys later. Okay. We didn't know what to call it. And she woke up one day and she was like, it's going to be called the Logan leash, which was cute. This is my dog. Okay. It is a 1/2 inch. But she does it a little bit thicker. And if you guys are around tomorrow at the end of the day, we'll take a closer look at that. Okay, share my screen. Here we go. Okay, we are at 8:33, so technically we're at time. If people have to drop off, I understand. We're going to do a couple more things. Okay. We talked about crossing the street. We talked about the treat magnet. So practice this for fun inside if you can. Okay. Let's go on cue. Today videos are playing. Can you guys hear the audio or no? So. Okay. So there's a demo. Let's go or turn. So you noticed in the beginning, it was short turns like you guys are doing at home. Okay. Gradually, and I'm going to say next week, if you've done this every day, next week, take it outside and you can do a little further. Okay. And that's how that one progresses. Okay. Teaching a walking position is what we're going to do. It's going to be the last thing that we do before we get to sort of Q&A. And I am going to talk about sniffing because it's super important. But loose leash walking is something that it's one of the hardest things to teach because to teach your dogs rather, because they're dealing with a whole lot of distractions, a whole lot of triggers. The variables are always changing. Okay. When you're teaching loose leash walking, whether it's to a reactive dog or a non-reactive dog, you want to start without a leash and reinforce a walking position. So a walking position is going to be right down here by your leg. It doesn't mean that's where your dog has to spend all of their walk, but when you kind of want them back in a home base, just like your arm is here, their home base would be here. Okay. So when you're walking along and you want your dogs to come back closer to you, and they're let's say, we teach our dogs to check in, right? They're walking, they turn their head, you're like, yes, maybe you're rewarding them for that. Don't reach out in front of you. Don't reach out to the side. Reinforce your dog where you want their head to be, which is here. Okay. If you start to reinforce, or if you have been reinforcing out by the front, chances are you've already observed that your dog approaches you and stops right there. They don't come here anymore because that's not the position that you reinforced. So another client of mine is here with, I think, Mirabelle. Would Mirabelle be up for showing us, walk you through the walking position? Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So you guys can all see Yuka and Mirabelle. So we're going to do a couple things first. Yuka, you're going to stand up with Mirabelle. We're going to do this with the leash is perfect.
With a leash?
With the leash is perfect. Okay. So they're in the house, hence using a collar, but I know that Yuka always walks her dogs in a harness.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the leash, reinforcing a walking position is putting a treat down by your leg, whichever leg, and dogs are used to standing in front. So she's going to use her treat and get her right there. Now, most of your dogs will not swing into position and sit down like that, okay? But that's a product of other training. So as an example, just using that of where that position is, it's right by the leg. Okay, so Yuka's going to take a couple of steps and reinforce that walking position again. And her hands are going to be empty of treats before she does that. Perfect. Okay, and then she's going to turn around so you guys can see what it looks like from the back. Reinforcing that walking position. Okay. Again, if you're practicing this inside, do it without your leash. So your dog, again, isn't getting tangled or dealing with your leash mechanics while trying to figure out what you want. Okay. I'm also going to get Yuka to demonstrate, and this is going to make Mirabelle's day, a nice turn and a walking position. That's awesome. So you see those two things put together, a turn and a walking position. I'm going to get her to demonstrate a treat magnet. So that's grabbing a bunch of treats in your hand and feeding them off the back of your hand as you're walking, or shovel style, whichever works. If you drop them. Okay. So leading your dog around, it's a treat magnet. They get used to it as you're moving. Is that a distraction? Yes. Does it matter? No. If your goal is to reduce the frequency of the outburst that your dog has, you do what you need to. Okay. Thank you, Mirabelle. Thank you, Yuka.
Thank you.
Okay. Doing this inside, playing that U-turn game, if you do that for a couple of days, you play this game where you're reinforcing a walking position and doing whiplash turns, your dogs are having fun with you. They don't know that they're training. They're just having fun. You're building engagement with them. You're increasing reinforcement. Okay. You're going to be practicing inside with low distractions, and then you're going to add the outside things. Okay. But that's typically done in a bit more of a structured, right? Okay. Do you guys have questions about this? Is how you start. This is not, the be all and end all of teaching loose leash walking, but it's a really good start. So just to recap, human skills, because it's human skills. It's not your dog right now. It's human skills. Okay. So your handle of your leash, this person puts it around their wrist, but this isn't my picture. So put in your fist, right? You've got that thumb loop. You have your treat hand, and you have, sorry for the typo, a default position for your arm. You have a default walking position. It's a bit of a delay there. Okay. So handle, hand, treat, hand at a default position for your arm. For walking, you have a default position for delivering that treat. You have a treat pouch and your marker word, whatever it is, make it the same. If it's yes, make it yes. Just yes. Not yes and good dog, you're so sweet. Just yes. If it's good dog, that is just good dog. Make it like a short and sweet. And if it's a clicker, that's fine too. Okay. Know that the order of events for you is mark, hand in your treat pouch, reward in place, and ideally have your dog be able to keep their chin parallel to the ground, okay, while they are moving. A couple of things, there's a couple of reasons for this, and I don't usually spotlight myself, but here we go. Okay. There's a couple of reasons for this. So it's going to be good, yes, click, hand in the treat pouch, reward in place. And the reason that you want your dog's chin parallel to the ground is it's very uncomfortable for your dogs to have to do this and try and walk with you at the same time. Okay. If you're trying to keep a relaxed, neutral dog, this is not it. Okay. You also don't want dogs to start to jump when they're getting treats from you. If you have a smaller, a toy dog or a smaller dog, there's some different mechanisms you can use for treat delivery. Yeah, but you want to keep them here, chin parallel to the ground, and then your hands go back to default. For 3 of those bullets, we can shorten it by saying, don't have treats in your hand. Okay, treats are for your treat pouch. If you must, your pocket, but I prefer you get a treat pouch. Not in your hand, because your hand is supposed to be managing your leash, and the length of that leash, drop it to treat, because chances are when you're dropping it to treat, you feel fine. You've still got that one anchor. You feel fine doing that slack. Or if you have a long enough leash, you see why I start to preach the long leash. If you have a long enough leash and you're holding it like this, okay, and this is your default position, if your leash is long enough, you can have your hand down here. So there's only, maybe 3 feet between you and your dog. There we go. So 3 feet between your dog. You can still keep that like this, reach into your treat pouch and give your dog a treat, and you're still anchored in 2 places. Okay. And then your hands go back to their default position. I'm going to urge you guys to try something, and we don't have time to do it, but take your new leash skill, take your treat container, take your treat pouch, stand in front of a mirror and practice. Just like skiing, biking, playing an instrument, your muscle memory and the better you are at those mechanics gives you one less thing to fumble with when you're also trying to get your dog to do something, right? So training your human skills is super important. Okay. We're going to revisit this tomorrow. We're going to open up the floor for questions again. So teaching your position with movement. Then you're going to add the leash because you haven't even gone outside yet. Then you're slowly going to add distractions. And then maybe with distractions, your dog is only able to do a couple of feet. That's okay. Then you're adding duration, more steps in a row with the leash loose and some distractions, maybe 2. Then you're adding different distractions. And then you're adding duration and additional distractions. So you're leveling up slowly. And if at any point your dog is struggling, you're going to drop down a step in the ladder. I would say that until you get to the end, none of those distractions should be dogs. Because if for most of you, dogs are sort of that ultimate trigger, that's not the distraction you're going to use while you're trying to build proficiency at a new skill. Right? It would be like teaching you how to play the piano now and then ask you to have a recital tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Questions, discussions. There's some things that I'm going to move to tomorrow. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some sniffing. So I am going to put that slide up and you guys can see it while I take some questions in the chat. Okay. So open up to questions. Okay, this is the slide I wanted to share. Okay, you guys read the slide. I will read the questions in the chat, and then we'll go from there. You guys can see the slide? Okay. Okay, I'm going to read questions while you're ready, while you're reading. Yes, freezing. treats with mitts. Okay. Okay, so questions are coming in. I'm going to start answering them slowly. Anything new for you guys on the importance of sniffing slides? Just stuff that you guys... Sniffing is how your dogs get information about the world. Taking them outside and not allowing them to sniff such in a way that it is fulfilling for them is like sending them outside, sending you outside blindfolded, right? It's super, super important. Find ways to let your dogs do that. It helps relax them. So when you go outside and your dog is like just sniffing, you're like, oh my God, you're sniffing at nothing. Because you don't smell it, but it's not nothing. Right? And they probably smelled it a good block away. Okay. I'm going to stop that share. Again, we are just over time. So if you need to drop off, feel free. If you don't, I am going to start going through these questions. We'll answer as many as they can. And then at some point, we all need to bed. And I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. Okay. Tomorrow being the last day, if we run over, I'll hang out for a little bit longer. Okay. So if you missed yesterday, there was an email that was sent out yesterday to everybody. Unless you only registered today, in which case it'll be, but there was an email yesterday. No, this morning. There was a long time ago. There was an email that was sent at about 7 a.m. Eastern this morning. At the bottom of that email is the link from yesterday. Okay. Is the turn cue different from this way where you have the dog come to walk? No, it's not different. Okay. But if your this way cue is having some latency, as in your dog isn't really responding, I would suggest you play the game and use a different cue, right? So if you don't have a lot of success with this way, then play the game, give it a different word so you get that speed. Okay. New game. Okay. How are you holding your hand for the treat magnet? Yes, dropping them. Drop them. I drop them. You drop them all the time. Again, this is a mechanics thing. Take your little Tupperware container, take a bunch of treats, put your Tupperware container on the table, and practice feeding them out of your hand. Okay. The best way to do them, best way to do it is how some people eat peanuts. When you have grab a handful of peanuts, okay, fess up. Are you a single popcorn eater or are you like a grab a handful and jiggle eater? How many of you are grab a handful and jiggle eaters because treat magnets will come more naturally to you? Okay, grab some treats just like you would peanuts or popcorn. They're in your hand. You kind of align them so that they're like lying across your palm, and you're really good at, like, I don't know how you guys do this. I'm a single popcorn eater. Okay, get them in your. It's the same. Get them in your mouth faster, except your hand is this way. So it might be this way, and your dog is eating out of the back, or this way, like a little reverse bulldozer, and you're feeding them out this way. But it takes practice, a lot of practice. Okay? But again, if you're a multi-peanut jiggler, then that's going to be much easier for you. Okay. Practice, practice, practice. It's definitely a skill. Building engagement. Are you referring to cues like touch and looking at us? Yes, maybe. If your dog enjoys touch, we're gonna set aside look at you. Okay. So if they enjoy touch or spin or things that they enjoy doing with you and they are engaged when they're doing it with you, then yes, that's what you want to do. You do not want to do or ask for behaviors that your dog isn't really good at doing in front of distractions, because that's not engaging. It's just frustrating for both of you. Okay. I'm not going to say that I want you to build on look at that for reactivity all of the time, because if you have a nervous dog, teaching them that what you expect is for them to look at you also means don't pay attention to the thing that you find dangerous. Okay. I would much rather have a dog go, I see a thing and then look back at me. I see a thing and then look back at me, which is a pattern game that I teach in my fuller class, right? But it's not stare at me. Okay. Do I ever praise during training verbally? Yes, all the time. All the time. Right? So treats and saying good is perfectly fine. Okay. Just as humans, we tend to talk too much. When you're first teaching your dog something new, you tended to reinforce all the time. So the reinforcement history for that thing, right? Now that your dogs can sit or lie down, chances are you don't reinforce it very often. When you're teaching a new behavior, you should be reinforcing that behavior every time. And I would say reinforce it with food, because you get a deeper learning history than if you just said good dog. Okay. Answer that. Can you use this to stop reacting to triggers out the window? And I'm going to say yes. If you use that if by this, you mean the full approach, reducing exposure to triggers, which means reducing exposure to being able to see things out the window. And I'm going to ask Danielle to point at her windows right now. So they live on a main street level. They have these glorious windows where the bottom fourth, like quarter maybe, is covered with window film. So that they still get the light. They can still, she's doing the little demo. There you go. Thank you very much. Sometimes that's what reducing exposure to triggers is, because you're not home. So you can reduce exposure to triggers when you're home by calling your dogs away, if you can get on it all the time. Or if you're in a place where people pass by your window all the time. I'm not going to say leave your blinds closed, right? Especially in the winter, you have no light. But I will say one of the best and easiest ways to reduce your dog's exposure to triggers is to block the bottom part of your window. They can still hear, okay? But for dogs that are sort of overly visually stimulated, or sit there just waiting for something to happen, remove it. It's a bit of a stretch sometimes. People go, you mean you want me to block my window? I say, try it for a little while and see just how much quieter your house can be. Then you can start to teach them things like the jingle of a collar that they hear. Now they can't see it, but you can use that sound to make a different association. There's a whole long training thing for that, but that's something that you can do. Okay. So yes, you can use all of this management, reduction, and games for triggers to the window, but you have to use it like in full. I think I unspotlighted. I think we're good. Okay. Back to a dog lying down on a beach. It's a great place for a safari. Yes, it is. If it can be quiet, if it's low exposure to triggers, do it on the beach. Like, don't do it at prime time. Okay. Winter. So We're not in Yellowknife. I'm in Ontario. It sometimes gets super cold, but not as cold as that. Suggestions for treats with mitts is probably to use gloves. Okay. Dexterity is hard. So depending on where you live, where it's cold, this is not going to cut it for Yellowknife, but those gardener gloves that have silicone palms on them that you can put, on your hand. If you have the mitts where the fingers get cut off, again, not for Yellowknife, the top of the fingers get cut off, right? And so you've got warm over your hand here, but you've got rubber coated so your fingers are protected from the elements and the saliva, but you've got grippy and your hands stay clean. Squeeze tubes in -40, your tubes may freeze. So, but squeeze tubes, you can take food, blend it with water, or wet food, mix it with water. You can actually squeeze it out, and that actually makes treat magnets like super easy. Your dog needs to get used to it, but they can lick it out the back. -40, you might just sing a giant mitt full of treats. Be like, here, you get all the treats in my gloves. You come up with something creative, or they have those little palm warmer things that you can put in your gloves so that at least your palm is warm if your fingers are going to be a little bit cold. No need to apologize about being obsessed. I understand. Okay. In areas of close proximity, like in elevators, how do we manage distance? You don't get in the elevator is unfortunately the short answer, because your dog is not going to learn if they're constantly being put, in that position. And that's tricky. It can be inconvenient. You might have to wait until somebody goes up, right? Depending on how your dog reacts to other people in the lift, they might not want to get in the elevator with you. But if they do, you might want to wait to the next one because it's a perceived threat. They're not really sure, but they don't know. And in an elevator, your dog cannot move away. So they're being forced to, be exposed to it. And you're probably managing them in the best way you know how, given that proximity, but it's not conducive to them learning. Okay. The rope or fabric leash is the trigger. Can I use a chain leash? And I'm going to need a little bit more information on that, whether you mean that the rope or the fabric leash around your dog is a trigger, or the sound of the leash, or the leash on somebody else. And then a little bit more clarity on what kind of chain leash you're talking about. The only kind of chain leash that I would ever actually recommend would be one where you only have chain between the harness and your handle, not one that goes around your hand. And I really only recommend that for dogs who bite their leashes, because they're going to stop biting it because it's metal, but that's not good for their teeth. So a little bit more clarity, and we'll come back to that. It's hard. Yes, it's hard. Treat with your hand closest to the dog. Yes. Leash handle in your non-treat hand. Treat with your hand closest to your dog. Avoid crossing your body. Okay. If you have to bring your dog over to the side that your treat pouch is on to reward there, do that. If you start crossing your body, your dog is going to start crossing in front of you, and that's just not good practice. Stop the screaming. All of the things, the distance, the under threshold, being far away enough, treat magnets, all of those things over and over, repeated over and over again. Reactivity happens in the home. Passing dog barks. He hears it from the couch and he reacts. I would use the same. If he likes the nose target, you pull him away. And depending on the proximity of Claudia, if she's not around and you can do a treat scatter, great. If you can teach him a spin or do something else, if he's got a happy spot, like his mat or something that you've hardcore reinforced, do that. Does it mean that I let her sniff on every corner on the walk? Yes or no? Yes and no. So, and I'm going to pair that with, I was taught that sniffing meant your dog is not engaging with you. That's true. If your dog is sniffing, they're sniffing and they're not engaging with you, but it's not bad. It's quite cruel, actually, to take your dog out for a walk and never let them sniff. But remember, if you were in yesterday's, there was that balance between, a full-on sniffing walk and then let them sniff for a bit at the beginning of the walk, because every time your dog goes outside, you see the same thing. They do not. They see the same thing, but they're going to smell all kinds of different things. So the environment is different for them every time they go outside, right? Give them some time to sniff. before you pull them away. And I'm going to challenge people who say, my dog sniffs for a really long time. When your dog sniffs, set your iPhone, set your timer. I know that people are like, my dog was sniffing for 5 minutes. We went outside, their dog sniffed for 30 seconds. Is that really that long? It's not that long. Okay. Doesn't mean that you have to let her sniff at every corner, but part of the training is you get to sniff, turn, let's go. Because turn and let's go has become reinforcing. So you're not necessarily always just taking things away. If you did not register for today, you'll get that second link for yesterday when this way. So yeah, this way or turn is fine. The link for yesterday and today will be coming out for you tomorrow. The cue for bringing them back to your side can be whatever you want. If you've been using heel, use heel. If you use pokeroo, use pokeroo. Whatever it is, as long as you're consistent with it and you reinforce it. I don't know why I'm using pokeroo right now. How to escape without having to pull it is why we teach the game behavior and different things like that so that you don't have to pull as much, right? So right now, today, I would say that none of you are in a position where you're not going to have to pull your dogs, but over time, the goal is, okay, can we change the language of training for things they are already used to? Portuguese, teach some new skills. Yes, you can use it. You can use whatever, again, pokeroo. You can use whatever word. You can mix up the words as long as they are consistent. And what you're talking about in your question, Letitia, is called cue transfer, and it's a much longer discussion. But if you Google cue transfer for dog training, you'll find that there's a process for how to do that, and you can replace the words. Okay, but it's a very specific way. How do you praise the shake off? If you use yes, yes. If you have a clicker, click it. And I know Claire has a clicker. So click the shake off. You didn't get the email this morning. Please check your spam, guys, because that seems to be where my emails have ended up quite a bit. There were, however, 324 people signed up for this. So some people may have gotten their emails slightly later than others. So check that out. Okay, you did that in your living room too, Heather. I assume you're talking about window film and you're saying it helped. Thank you. Would this same concept apply to crate covers in a busy room? And that's JC, and JC, I think we're speaking on Friday. I'm going to say no, because you're introducing confinement with the crate. It's different than window film. Okay. Squeeze tubes are fun. The travel ones, get ones that are easy to wash out. Don't waste your money on ones that are like have super small openings, because chunky dog food and squeeze tubes are not fun. Tug of war trying to bite the rope. Okay. I've been bitten badly trying to prevent him from pulling us into the street. If you have a dog that likes to jump and tug at their leash, I would hesitate to switch to a chain leash because you run the risk of them damaging their teeth. Right? So you have to be very, very careful. Junie sniffing because she can find rabbit poop with extreme precision and eat it. Yes. So maybe you allow her to do the sniffing, and Val is laughing. I was like, Blizzard likes rabbit poop, I think. You're going to maybe create environments where she gets to do the sniffing, so it's not like all in the street everywhere, because you do have to be careful, right? And rabbit poop carries some not nice stuff. There are mitts for photographers with extreme cold weather that have, yes, I've seen them. And it's basically, you can just flick out one finger and have it freeze to death in the Yukon weather. But at least the rest of your fingers are covered, and it's for photographers so that their trigger finger, they're not mashing all the buttons on their camera. Tomorrow we're going to talk about this, but can we take them to regular walks outside while still training everything at home? Think about what your regular walks are like. Chances are no. So if you're taking your dog on a walk and they are regularly getting triggered, then you are bringing a dog home to train that has been triggered and is now over threshold. And we're going to talk about this tomorrow because it is one of the hardest things for a lot of people to swallow. So we're going to spend some time on it tomorrow. And if my grads are still here with me tomorrow, I'm going to ask you guys to talk about your experiences too, if you're willing. Shorten your walks. Find other ways to meet your dog's needs, because again, reducing exposure. So you have to walk for bathroom. Perfect. Take them to the bathroom. Then come back inside and do something else. Or take them to the bathroom, come back inside, and then go for a walk later when there's not as many people or not as many dogs. Your goal is to reduce the frequency and severity of their outbursts, and you can't do that if you're continually taking them on the regular walk that you've always taken them on. Okay. I think I've gotten to the end of the questions. So same format you'll get. It takes time to process. I put it into email, it gets sent out to everybody. Okay. I will see you guys again tomorrow. We will be training again tomorrow. If you have questions in the meantime, said 4 a.m. walks, kudos to you. That is dedication. It's probably dark. So thank you guys again for coming, and I will see you again tomorrow night. Okay. Bye.